My name is Chelsea Adler. I am currently a senior pricing manager and actuary at Root Insurance. And I have been in this specific role for a little over a year, but I've been in various different management and actuarial roles for the past 4 or 5 years. Yeah, so what in the world does an actuary do? I have actually written an entire blog about this because I feel like there is so much mystery around this profession. But in its simplest form, actuaries analyze and try to quantify risk and its financial impact. So there are many, many different ways that you can do that. But I specifically specialize in taking information about how people drive their cars and determine how much they should pay for their individual auto insurance. So it's all about crunching numbers and making sense of the data and figuring out how it has real world implications. In terms of like, where do actuaries work, both like the types of companies and roles, as well as like where in the world. Essentially, actuaries can be everywhere. Anywhere that there's risk present, actuaries can work. So the most traditional places that actuaries work would be insurance companies and consulting firms, but especially more recently, we've started seeing actuaries in tech companies like Amazon and Google, as well as some of the gig economy companies like Uber and Lyft. And so there's so many endless opportunities for actuaries in a multitude of different specialties, as well as types of companies all over the world. So I would say, compared to some comparable professions, the barrier to entry to becoming an actuary is actually fairly low to begin with. So generally speaking, to be able to get an entry-level position as an actuary, you need to have a bachelor's degree from college somewhere. It doesn't even have to be specialized in actuarial science. It could be any number of quantitative fields. And then you have to have demonstrated that you can pass at least typically 1 to 2 actuarial exams. And then it's not necessary, but it really helps to have had an internship with some related experience. So if you have the majority of those things, it's pretty likely that you'll be able to get at least an entry-level position as an actuary. Now, to become fully licensed in the actuarial profession, and to become what's typically referred to as a fellow of either the Casualty Actuarial Society or the Society of Actuaries, you have to pass a series of exams. And typically there's around 9 to 10 of those. The path does vary based on what area you want to specialize in, but this can be a pretty long road. Most of the exams require 300 to 400 hours of studying in preparation. And so it generally takes people around 5 to 10 years to get through all of their exams. For me personally, it took about 7 years to pass all of the exams and become fully credentialed. And so, I specifically went to Ohio State for my college career, and I did major in actuarial science with a minor in economics. I came out of college with 3 exams passed and was able to secure a job right out of college full-time. And then one of the greatest benefits of being an actuary is that, again, compared to some very similar professions where you have to get kind of higher education to do the job, rather than going to graduate school and paying a bunch of money to then become, a PhD or get your master's, you will actually be supported by your employer to take these exams over time. So not only will they pay for your exam material and your registration, but a lot of employers actually give you time at work to study, which is just a huge benefit compared to some other professions. So yes, it is a huge commitment and it's a long road, it can be, but you get a lot of support along the way that you might not get with other professions. So to maintain my license, I have to get at least 30 hours of continuing education every year, which it might sound like a decent amount. At least that's the reaction I've gotten from some people. However, if you compare that to the investment you made to getting your credentials, keeping in mind that studying for just one exam required 400 hours of studying, 30 is not bad at all. Wow. So growing up, my father is a State Farm agent and my mom works in his office. And I got to witness from a very young age how amazing insurance can be and the benefit that it brings to all of our lives, even if you don't recognize it. And so I really fell in love with this idea of like, you can really help people and work for the good of society through the insurance industry. And unfortunately, I think insurance does sort of get a bad rap, and it's not always viewed favorably. And so I'm really excited, especially in my current role, to hopefully revolutionize the way that insurance is done and make it into something that people actually think favorably of and seek out as something that's really, really good and recognize the benefit it does bring in their lives. One of the main things that drew me to the actuarial profession and that I still very much enjoy today is one, the variety of work. I'm pretty much never bored because there's always new challenges that come up. And then two, the flexibility that I have is kind of unreal. I really can work anywhere in the world, any hours for the most part that I want. And it's just really great to be able to kind of do work in the way that works best for me. So I really, really appreciate those aspects of the role. And then I personally, I am an introvert by nature, but I really love working with people. And so one of the great things about being an actuary is I do have some of that independent alone time to kind of crunch numbers and do my own thing. But then I get to have a few hours of the day where I'm working with people and getting some of that interaction. So the interplay between those two, so that I'm not constantly just in meetings or only working by myself, that combination has been so rewarding for me personally and just my personality. I will say, I think there are so many wonderful aspects of this profession, but the biggest challenge or drawback that I've heard from others and that I personally see is that it is a pretty demanding job, at least early on, because studying for the exams is not easy. They require, like I said before, hundreds of hours of preparation. And generally speaking, the pass rate is pretty low. And so the bar is set very high, and it can be discouraging for people who don't have success, at least, consistently throughout that journey. So just know going in that it's going to be hard, and that in the end, it will be worth it when you get through all the exams. But there are going to be several years of your life that you may have to make sacrifices, and be a little bit more focused on work and exam progression. But eventually, when you get through it all, it does get a lot better, and there are more opportunities that open up. Because I think there is this misconception that actuaries are just like hidden in a basement somewhere, crunching numbers all by themselves in the dark, and that just couldn't be farther from the truth. The actuarial profession is super collaborative, and you have to be able to work with others to do the job effectively. So I would say on a day-to-day basis, I'm in meetings 5 to 8 hours a day, working with people all over the company. And that's a little bit more of a focus for me in my role as a manager. If I was an actuarial analyst in more of an individual contributor role, I would have a little bit more independent work, but it's always going to be some combination of independent analysis and working with others to achieve your goals. So I actually was a synchronized swimmer for 15 years, and I competed on the varsity team at Ohio State for 4 years. And I sort of joke to people sometimes that I am officially retired from my first full-time job because it was very intense. Being a collegiate athlete is a huge commitment. And so I think in addition to other jobs that I've held, that experience in college really positioned me, I think, for success in the corporate world. There's just so much in terms of perseverance and strategy and teamwork, all of that and grit that you learn being, an athlete that are essential for any job, really, but definitely have been helpful in my career as an actuary. I think one of the most fundamental is you do need to have strong analytical and problem solving skills. If you don't like math or problem solving, that might be problematic for this job. But some less emphasized, but very, very critical characteristics of an actuary would be communication. It's so important that you're able to take the results of your work and be able to communicate it effectively to all of the different stakeholders. So that is something that's very important. I would say also, ability to organize and prioritize your work effectively, be able to partner with people, and just initiative to take on and be willing to constantly learn and ask questions. And I think curiosity is also a really important thing as well. There's always something new to learn, and there's really, in I guess one of the lessons I've learned as I've been an actuary for a while now is the more I learn, the more I realize that no one has it all figured out. So just kind of knowing that it's important to kind of push boundaries and try new things and be curious about what you're learning. Those will all be really helpful to position you for success as an actuary. I guess backing up a little bit too, the paths for an actuary can vary significantly. If you never want to be in a management role, you could have a very successful career as an actuary, and your earning potential and opportunities are not going to be limited by that. But if you do enjoy, investing in a team and coaching and managing people, that can be an option all the way up through CEO levels. In fact, the CEO of the company I work for, Root, is actually an actuary. So you kind of have a lot of options in terms of where you could work within an organization as an actuary. So just important to kind of start with that. So if you, do have an interest in being a manager as well as an actuary, I would say the most rewarding aspect of that for me is just the getting to see your team members grow and realize their dreams and aspirations, and just being a part of that and getting to support and encourage people is something that I just find so life-giving. I really enjoy having conversations with people, getting to know them on a personal and professional level, and being very strategic about how do you support them in their dreams. I know I've been very fortunate to have a lot of support on my journey, and so I just love getting to provide that to others. I will say, in terms of like challenges or less enjoyable aspects, I think the hardest thing is when somebody on your team is struggling, and when you have to go through the process of kind of performance reviews and potentially having to let somebody go. That can be a really painful process. And so I would just say that, that is a part of the responsibilities, but hopefully not going to be something that you're doing a lot. And I would say 95% of what I do is really, really enjoyable. And it is super fun to be able to kind of drive vision and strategy for the team and be involved in conversations and the decisions that are made in terms of what work we're doing and who's doing it, and just kind of creating vision for the team is something that's really fun for me. At the very, basics, you need a computer. In fact, I actually have 3 monitors set up here at my desk, which is super helpful. Just when I'm reviewing things, I can be a lot more efficient when I have multiple screens up because there's just a lot of numbers everywhere. So, again, computer is kind of the main tool that you'll need. But then within that, there are several software packages that we do use on a regular basis. So proficiency with kind of like the Google or Microsoft suite products like Word and Excel, those are pretty fundamental. And then in terms of programming languages, actuaries do need to be comfortable with pulling and manipulating data. And oftentimes you do that with programs like R, Python. We do use SQL and VBA a little bit as well. And so having comfort with one or a few of those is really important. Whether you travel or not really depends on the job that you do. I would say in general, most insurance company actuaries or other similar roles typically don't travel a ton for work. But if you choose to go like the consulting route, you're very likely going to be traveling quite a bit to go see all of your clients. So it can vary. I personally don't have to travel really much at all for my job, except for professionalism conferences that are put on to get my continuing education. And those generally are ones that I can pick myself and are a little bit more enjoyable in terms of locations. So it's pretty flexible, but I would say it can be anywhere from no travel at all to traveling every week, just depending on your preference. So I personally think one of the greatest benefits of this profession is that you can make a really great living. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have that upfront investment in, say, graduate school or something to where you're shelling out all this money to then like be paying student loans forever. You can get into the profession very early on, start making money immediately, and the ability to have your salary increase very quickly over time is also a huge benefit of the profession. So just to kind of put things into perspective, when you start off as an entry-level actuary, if you have at least 1 to 2 exams starting off, based on what the internet tells me, you can generally expect to make around $60,000 to $70,000 per year starting out. That's like brand new, fresh out of college. Now, as you pass all of your exams and you become a fully credentialed actuary, it is very common for you at that point in time to be making upwards of 6 figures. And most credentialed actuaries who have been practicing for more than just a few years do make even into the $200,000, $300,000 range. I think that one of the biggest is just that it is a pretty unknown profession. I would say at least 50% of the time when I tell people I'm an actuary, I get a very blank, confused stare, and I have to explain what it is, and they've never heard of it before. And in those cases, it is a little bit frustrating because I personally think it should be a very highly respected profession for all of the hard work that we put into it. And I think it's very akin to being a doctor or having a PhD in some other, specialty. But because a lot of people don't know what it is, they just, they don't have that same respect because they've never heard of it. In the cases where people have, when I introduce myself, there is this level of like, wow, I know that's really hard. You worked really, like you studied a lot for that. So that is gratifying at times when people do know what it is. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And then in terms of like stigmas, I think there is, again, misconceptions that actuaries are like super nerdy. They don't know how to communicate. They're awkward, and sure, maybe there's some truth to that for some individuals, but I do not think it encompasses the entire profession. And every actuary that I have met is a vibrant individual that has just so much personality and are great communicators and team members. So I just think a lot of that's not true. So there are many paths that an actuary can take. There's auto insurance, and then there's life insurance, and there's home insurance, and annuities, and investments, and all these different areas that you could be working in. I really enjoy auto insurance, and previously I spent 5 years working in pricing homeowners insurance as well. I love both of those products because they very clearly impact every single person on a daily basis. I mean, who doesn't own a car or live in a home or rent an apartment somewhere? And so these are products that have just a very tangible impact in our day-to-day life. And I love that they're so dynamic too. Like our world is constantly being transformed by technology and self-driving cars and smart homes. Like these things are constantly making my job really interesting, trying to figure out how they all work together. And so I love it because it's very clear that I'm having an impact on people's daily lives, and the work is so interesting because it's always changing. The biggest drawback is the auto insurance industry is heavily regulated. I think most people know that you're required by law to purchase auto insurance, and it's just one of those necessary evils that you deal with. So on top of that, every single state has their own unique rules and laws. And so that makes my job extremely tricky, because when you work for a company that has business in every state in the country, you have to treat each one differently. And that it makes it really challenging to scale things. So it's good in the sense that there's very good job security because the system has always been this way. It is very challenging, and they're just, you can't replace my job with a computer. So from that perspective, it's great to know that I'm pretty much always going to have a job. But it can be tricky, and there are some individuals and there are some departments that have very challenging personalities. And so that can be an interesting challenge for the job. I think the biggest thing that I wish I had known or just was emphasized was that, our jobs in general are a marathon and not a sprint. And especially when it comes to getting through the actuarial exams to become a fully credentialed actuary, there is or can be this emphasis on just get through them as fast as you can and get them over with. And I do think that is a good strategy to some degree, but it's very easy to burn yourself out too. So I would say something that I'm still learning is the importance of setting boundaries and making sure that I have balance between other priorities in my life and work, and that work is not everything. And so just kind of reminding yourself that it's great if you have a job that you enjoy and that you feel purpose in, but it is not everything. And it is very important to establish your own priorities and make sure that you, set your boundaries and make sure that work doesn't take over your life. I think historically, the profession has been touted for having amazing work-life balance. And I think that can be true. I personally have never worked 40 hours a week. I have always worked more. And that's partially just my preference. I am a hard worker. I love what I do, and I have really high standards for the work that I do. So I've generally always been very open to putting in some extra hours just to do the best that I can. When I worked in a traditional insurance environment, that was by no means expected. It was very doable for me to only work 40 hours per week and to, leave and not really have any responsibilities in the evenings or on the weekends. I currently work in a very high pace startup insurance company environment to where it is a little bit more demanding. And while I wouldn't say there is a specific expectation that I work a certain number of hours, at the end of the day, all that matters is that I get the work done. And sometimes that does require working evenings and weekends. And so I would say on average, I tend to work between 50 to 60 hours per week, but I am no longer studying. So that does help kind of offset the increased hours. I know that there are some actuaries working more in the consulting space who work upwards of that, like maybe 80 to 100 hours if they're in like a busy season. So it's really, again, what you want to make it as well as your preference. You know, if you want more of that balance, it is absolutely achievable. And the traditional insurance environment is going to be more conducive to that. But if you're a go-getter and you really want to, you know, make more money or advance in your career faster, then that likely will require working more hours. So it's, again, kind of what you make it. One of the things that was super helpful for me early on was doing a job shadow with an actuary. My father is a State Farm agent, and so he had some connections at the State Farm headquarters. So he took me over there for a day, and I literally just sat with an actuary, asked them a bunch of questions, went to their different meetings, and really got to see what day-to-day life was like. And that for me was kind of the piece that sold me of like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to do this. Another way, if you've maybe started down the path of pursuing being an actuary for a little while, getting an internship is like one of the greatest ways that you can tell, like, okay, do I actually like this work? And can I see myself doing this longer term? That'll be super helpful as well. And then two other resources that I think are really helpful in discerning this would be one, my blog. I specifically created it to give people a realistic view into what it's like to being an actuary. And so I do have sort of a day in the life post that gives a theoretical but realistic schedule of what I do every single day, kind of diving into some nitty-gritty details. And then there are also just a lot of really great YouTube videos out there where people will do day in the life and kind of answer, what does an actuary do questions. And so I would just encourage people to seek those out and listen to those, and that will kind of help point you in the right direction. I think doing a ton of research and talking to a lot of people is really kind of the best way to get started. If you think you want to become an actuary, reach out to one, ask them what it's like. What do they like? What do they not like? What do they do on a day-to-day basis? I think those conversations will be, extremely helpful for positioning you for success with whatever direction you do choose to go. And then just in general, like, I think it's so important that you show up and do your absolute best every single day, no matter what you're doing, because the reality is you never know who's watching. And when opportunities arise, you want to be ready. And so I would just encourage you to always, have high standards for the work that you do, and be bold and confident to ask for what you want to do. Because if you don't ask, it's almost always a no. I've seriously lost count of the number of times I've been told no, but I don't focus on that. I focus on the doors that do open. And I am really fortunate and grateful to say that so many opportunities have come out of just putting myself out there and asking questions and boldly pursuing things. And at the end of the day, if you don't end up loving the actuarial profession or choosing to go all the way through exams, one of the greatest things is that the skills you learn in studying and pursuing the actuarial profession are transferable to so many other professions. And so even if you start down one path, that does not, pigeonhole you in one direction. You can definitely pivot to other things. So those are just a few pieces of general advice for career.